Shabbat Shalom. This week, we witnessed a wealthy, racist, xenophobic, and paranoid leader use his power and his influence to speak ill of a people for the sole reason that they are different. Of course, I'm speaking of the character Balak in this week's Torah portion. You're thinking of someone else? Balak is a king of the neighboring Moabite community, and he's fearful of the Jewish people. They're too big, he complains. They have too much influence. Sounds like a familiar trope. But Balak decides that the only way that he can get a leg up on the Israelites is to hire a local prophet, Balaam, to stand on top of a mountain and curse the Israelites. Although Balak does his best to persuade Balaam to curse the Israelites, Balaam repeatedly tells Balak that he can actually only speak the words that God puts into his mouth. It should come as no surprise, then, that when Balaam goes up to the high place, looks out to the Israelite community, he does not curse the Israelites, but he blesses them. Differences and all, with the words, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How good, how fair, how wonderful are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel. This blessing was so powerful, in fact, that the rabbis who formed our prayer book ensured that the first prayer we say in the morning service begins with these words, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How good, how fair, how wonderful are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. Now, what is it about these tents and dwelling places that brought Balaam to speak these words? Rabbi Yochanan teaches in the Talmud that Balaam saw that the doors of their tents did not exactly face each other. So the Israelites were able to respect each other's privacy. In other words, the Israelites respected community cohesion and the right to be different, unique, individual. Jews embrace differences. Take a second and think about the one central tenet of Judaism. Now, if I was to poll the room right now, I'm sure that I would get different answers from nearly all of you. After all, as the saying goes, when you put two Jews in a room, three opinions, there you go. The rabbis, they struggled with this as well. For Rabbi Akiba, not the, but a central teaching of the Torah was to love your neighbor as yourself. For Hillel, it is what is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. While these stalwarts of our tradition could not even agree on a central tenet of Judaism, the fact that they cannot agree is actually one of the more beautiful things about Judaism. We embrace dialogue. We embrace nuance. We embrace the right to be different. Judaism does not say, you must think this way. Judaism says, oh, good, you're thinking. Indeed, one of our core Jewish values is hakarat hatov, seeing the good. Hakarat hatov is about keeping a positive outlook, seeing the good in the world at all times of life. In Pirkei Avot, the lessons of our ancestors, we're taught, who is the rich one? The one who is happy with his lot. We embody hakarat hatov when we sit at our Passover Seder and we read, Dayenu, it would have been enough. We embody hakarat hatov when we sing Ma Tovu and say, yes, there may be issues with our house, but our dwelling is pretty wonderful. And we raise our voices in thanksgiving. And we embody hakarat hatov when we reflect on this week and look at all the good that happened this week. The NBA is standing up for LGBT rights. Thousands stood proudly at the Jerusalem Pride Parade. And as an editor's note, I hate that I had to change this morning. And we almost went an entire week without a mass casualty terrorist event. I know these may seem like small victories in the grand scheme of things, but hakarat tov, seeing the good, is like gratitude. You have to start small. In a world full of kvetching, Jews are different because we tend to look towards the good. Truthfully, it's these differences and distinctions that we observe that make us who we are. Jews, for example, observe time differently. As Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel so beautifully articulated in his book, The Sabbath, Jews on Shabbat create a palace in time. When we say Kiddush, we're not imbuing special holiness to the wine or the grape juice we drink, but rather the wine is merely a conduit to as we attribute holiness to the time of Shabbat, which we separate from the rest of the week. We do this with Shabbat in all of our holy times. We live out our differences with others by how we observe time. So, perhaps Balaam's blessing was a reminder after all. Perhaps Balaam's blessing was really meant to hold up a mirror to us. Perhaps Balaam's blessing was really something very Jewish, embodying the value of hakarat hatov, seeing the good and celebrating what makes Jews different. This Shabbat, may we be like Balaam, reminding us to celebrate our differences, to see the good, and create a Shabbat shalom, a Shabbat of communal wholeness, of goodness, of peace. Ma tovu, how good it is to be different. Join with me, will you, on page 630. Ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, va'ani berov chasdecha avo beitecha, eshtachave el heichal kodshecha be'yiratecha, ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, vani ahavti me'on beitecha, u'mekom mishkan kevodecha, mishkan kvodecha, va'ani eshtachave ve'echra evrecha lifnei Adonai osim, ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, ma tovu, ma tovu, ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. ואני תפילתי לך, אדוני את רצון, אלוהים ברוב חסדך, אלוהים ברוב חסדך, ענני באמת אישך. מה טובו, מה טובו, אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. מה טובו, מה טובו, אוהליך יעקב, משכנותיך ישראל. משכנותיך ישראל. Shabbat Shalom. I'd like to